Ethan Rose stood outside Romano's with $600 bills folded in his jacket pocket and a lie rehearsed on his tongue. Inside that restaurant waited a woman he'd never met. A woman with dwarfism who deserved better than what he was about to do. The money would keep the lights on for another month. It would silence his daughter's questions about why they ate cereal for dinner 3 nights straight. It would buy him time before the landlord's patience ran out completely, but it wouldn't wash away what he was about to become, the kind of man who gets paid to humiliate a stranger. Desperation makes cowards of good men, and tonight, Ethan would learn exactly how far he'd fallen. If you want to see how one terrible choice can change everything, stay with me until the end. And if this story moves you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The November rain had turned Philadelphia's streets into mirrors, reflecting neon signs and headlights in fractured patterns that made the whole city look as broken as Ethan felt. He stood beneath Romano's burgundy awning, watching well-dressed couples drift past him into warmth and laughter, into a world he'd once belonged to before medical bills and funeral costs had stripped away everything that mattered except his daughter. His phone buzzed. Marcus again. "You there yet?" "Don't chicken out on me, Ro. 600 cash. Just do the job." Ethan's thumb hovered over the screen. He could still walk away. He could go home to the apartment that smelled like mildew and desperation, tell 7-year-old Sophie they'd figure something else out. Watch her face try to hide disappointment she was too young to understand. He could keep whatever dignity he had left. But dignity didn't pay rent. He pocketed the phone and pushed through Romano's heavy glass door. Warmth hit him immediately. Not just heat, but the kind of comfort that comes from soft lighting and good wine, from tables set with real cloth napkins and conversations that never mentioned overdue notices or disconnection warnings. The hostess looked up from her podium, her smile professional and bright. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "I'm meeting someone." "Lena Brooks?" The hostess's smile flickered, just for a second, but Ethan caught it. Pity, maybe. Or knowing amusement. He'd seen that look before, usually right before someone delivered bad news while pretending to care. "Of course. Right this way." She led him through the main dining room, past couples leaning close over candlelight, past businessmen celebrating deals with expensive scotch, past families that looked nothing like his, intact, secure, unworried about whether tomorrow would bring eviction or electricity. The hostess stopped at a corner booth, partially hidden by a decorative screen of bamboo. "Your guest is already here. Enjoy your evening." Ethan rounded the screen and saw her. Lena Brooks sat with perfect posture in a custom-modified chair that brought her to comfortable table height. She wore a deep green dress that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly income, and her dark hair was swept back in a style that emphasized sharp cheekbones and eyes that missed nothing. She watched him approach with an expression he couldn't read, not hostile, not welcoming, just waiting. She was beautiful. That hit him first, unexpected and unwelcome. Beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with height and everything to do with the intelligence in her gaze, the set of her shoulders, the quiet dignity in how she occupied space without apology. She was also, according to Marcus, the target of a cruel joke Ethan had agreed to execute. "Lena?" He tried for warmth, for the easy charm that used to come naturally before grief had calcified him into something harder. "I'm Ethan. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was brutal." He slid into the booth across from her. Up close, he could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the way her fingers rested lightly on the stem of her water glass. Controlled, careful, as if she'd learned through hard experience not to let anything show. "You're not late," she said. Her voice was low, measured, with an edge of something he couldn't identify. "You're exactly on time. Marcus told me you were punctual." Ethan's stomach dropped. "You know Marcus?" "I know of Marcus, real estate agent, decent reputation, expensive taste, questionable judgment in friends." She tilted her head slightly. "He told me about you 3 weeks ago, said he had the perfect guy for me. Widowed father, good heart, just hit a rough patch. Needed someone who understood that life doesn't always go according to plan." The waiter appeared before Ethan could respond. Young, enthusiastic, probably working his way through college, and still believing the world was fundamentally fair. "Can I start you folks off with drinks? We have an excellent Pinot Noir from..." Water's fine for me, Ethan said quickly. The prices on this menu would make him sick. Whiskey, Lena said. Neat. Whatever's good. The waiter nodded and vanished. Lena's eyes never left Ethan's face. You look uncomfortable. I'm fine. You're gripping that menu like it's a life preserver. She leaned back slightly. Let me guess. You're wondering why Marcus set you up with someone like me. You're probably thinking there's been some kind of mistake, that this can't possibly be the right woman, that surely he meant someone else. That's not... Or maybe you're wondering what's wrong with me beyond the obvious. Why someone who looks like they have their life together needs to be set up on a blind date. Why I'd agree to meet a stranger on a Wednesday night instead of having dozens of better options. Her words were sharp, surgical, cutting through his prepared script and exposing the rot underneath. Ethan felt heat crawl up his neck. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Marcus had made it sound simple. Show up, act interested for an hour, then gradually reveal himself to be exactly the kind of guy she should avoid. Make inappropriate jokes, be condescending about her work, maybe mention her height in that careful way that pretends to be concerned, but really just wants to highlight difference. By dessert, she'd be ready to leave. By tomorrow, she'd have a story about another failed date, another guy who couldn't see past her dwarfism. And Ethan would have $600. But Lena wasn't playing the role Marcus had assigned her. She wasn't uncomfortable or grateful or eager to please. She was watching him like a scientist observing a specimen, waiting to see what kind of creature he'd reveal himself to be. I'm not wondering anything, Ethan said finally. I think Marcus was right. You seem like someone worth knowing. Do I? She accepted her whiskey from the returning waiter, took a slow sip, never breaking eye contact. And what exactly did Marcus tell you about me? This was the script. This was where he was supposed to demonstrate that Marcus had briefed him thoroughly, that he knew about her position at the architecture firm, her love of classic films, her quiet life that supposedly needed disrupting. He was supposed to use that information to build false intimacy, to make her believe this connection was real before pulling the rug out. But looking at her now, at the way she held herself like someone who'd been disappointed too many times to be surprised anymore, Ethan felt something crack inside his chest. He said you were kind, he heard himself say. Smart. That you deserved better than you'd been getting. That life had been unfair to you in ways that had nothing to do with what you could control. And you believed him? I wanted to. Lena set down her glass carefully. That's an interesting answer. Most people would just say yes. You said you wanted to. Past tense. The waiter returned, hovering hopefully. Are we ready to order? Give us a few minutes, Lena said, not unkindly. He retreated again. Silence stretched between them. Outside the bamboo screen, the restaurant hummed with other people's happiness, other people's normal Wednesday nights that didn't involve compromising themselves for grocery money. Ethan could feel the bills in his pocket like weights, anchoring him to a choice he hadn't fully made yet. Can I ask you something? Lena's voice was softer now, but no less direct. And I want you to be honest, because I've had enough lies in my life to recognize them at 50 paces. Why are you really here, Ethan? His prepared answer died on his tongue. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw intelligence, yes, but also exhaustion. The kind that comes from holding yourself together through situations that would have broken lesser people. The kind he recognized because he wore it too, every morning when he forced himself out of bed and into another day of barely surviving. I needed the money, he said. The words fell between them like stones into still water. Lena didn't move, didn't react, just waited for the ripples to spread. Marcus paid you to be here? $600. To take you out, act interested, then gradually show you I was all wrong for you. Make you feel like it was another failed connection, another guy who couldn't see past... He gestured vaguely, hating himself. Past the things that don't matter. My dwarfism, you mean? Yes. Why? I don't know. He didn't explain. Just said you'd been difficult about something, that you needed to be taught a lesson about expectations or reality or... I don't know. I stopped listening after he mentioned the money. Lena picked up her whiskey again, finished it in one smooth motion. Her hand trembled slightly when she set the glass down. Just that. A tiny tell that she was human after all, that this hurt, even though she was too disciplined to show it fully. And you agreed. I have a daughter, Sophie. She's 7. My wife died 3 years ago, cancer, the kind that takes everything, including your savings and your hope and your ability to believe anything good can last. I've been drowning ever since, working maintenance jobs that pay nothing, watching bills pile up, lying to Sophie about why we can't have birthday parties or new shoes or any of the things kids are supposed to have. The landlord's threatening eviction. The electricity company sent a final notice. I'm one crisis away from losing her to the system because I can't prove I can take care of her. He forced himself to meet Lena's eyes. So yes, I agreed. I needed $600 more than I needed to be a good person tonight. Another silence. Somewhere nearby, someone laughed. A bright, uncomplicated sound that belonged to a different universe than the one Ethan and Lena currently occupied. You could have lied to me, Lena said finally. You could have gone through with it, had a free meal, made me feel small, smaller than I already am in most people's eyes, collected your money, and forgotten about me by tomorrow. Why didn't you? Because you looked at me like you could see exactly what I was about to do, and I realized I couldn't do it. Not to you. Maybe not to anyone, but definitely not to someone who's clearly been through this before. I have. Lena's voice carried the weight of years. More times than I can count. Different setups, different motivations. Sometimes it's pity dates from friends who think I'm lonely. Sometimes it's guys who have a fetish. Sometimes it's people like Marcus who think they know what's best for me and decide to manipulate me into seeing things their way. I've been treated like a child, like a charity case, like a curiosity, like everything except a woman who might have her own thoughts about what she wants. She straightened her shoulders. I knew something was off when Marcus called. He's been pushing me to reconsider his offer on my building. I own the property his agency wants to develop. I've refused, multiple times. The timing of this sudden concern for my love life seemed convenient. So you knew this was a setup? I suspected, but I wasn't certain until I saw your face when you sat down. You looked like a man walking to his own execution. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. And then you told the truth, which Marcus definitely didn't pay you to do. Ethan pulled the $600 from his pocket and set it on the table between them. The bills looked obscene next to the elegant place settings, a reminder of exactly how different their worlds were. I can't keep this. You need it. I need a lot of things. My self-respect more than electricity, apparently. Or at least that's what I'm telling myself right now. Tomorrow I'll probably regret it. Lena stared at the money. What will you do? I don't know. Figure something out. I always do. It's just never enough. He slid out of the booth, leaving the bills where they lay. I'm sorry for agreeing to this, for being the kind of person who could be bought for $600, for wasting your time. Ethan. He paused, half standing. That was the most honest conversation I've had in months, maybe years. You didn't waste my time. She gestured to the empty seat. Stay. Have dinner. A real one, where we're both just two people who've been beaten down by life sharing a meal. No scripts, no expectations, just human connection. Novel concept, I know. I can't afford. I can. And before you get proud about it, consider that maybe I'm tired of eating alone. Maybe I'd like company that doesn't have an agenda beyond surviving the next conversation. Maybe we're both exhausted enough to just be honest for a few hours. Ethan looked at her, at the hope she was trying to hide, at the loneliness she wore like he wore his grief, at the chance for something that wasn't a transaction, or a lie, or a desperate scramble for survival. He looked at the money on the table, at the easy exit it represented. He sat back down. Okay, but I'm paying you back somehow, when I can. You already did. You told the truth when lying would have been easier. That's a currency I value more than cash. She picked up her menu. Now, since I'm buying, I'm having the steak. What looks good to you? For the first time in 3 years, Ethan laughed. Honestly, everything. I've been living on ramen and whatever Sophie doesn't finish. This menu reads like fantasy fiction. Then let's make tonight a fantasy. Tomorrow we go back to reality. Tonight we're just two people who've been through hell sharing an overpriced meal and pretending the world is kinder than we know it to be. The waiter appeared again, hopeful as ever. This time they were ready. Dinner lasted 2 hours. They talked about everything except the obvious: Ethan's poverty, Lena's dwarfism, the shameful arrangement that had brought them together. Instead, they traded stories about Philadelphia, about favorite books and terrible movies, about the small joys that made unbearable lives occasionally worth living. Lena told him about discovering architecture in college, about learning that buildings could be designed for everyone instead of just the average height majority, about fighting every day to be taken seriously in a field that treated her credentials like novelties. She told him about her property, a beautiful old building in Rittenhouse Square that developers were desperate to demolish for condos, and how holding on to it felt like holding on to her dignity. Ethan told her about Sarah, about the kind of love that makes you believe the universe is fundamentally good right up until it proves you wrong, about watching his wife fade by degrees, about promising her he'd take care of Sophie, about discovering that love and promises and good intentions don't pay bills or feed children or keep the darkness at bay. You talk about her like she's still here, Lena observed, working on her second whiskey. Parts of her are, in Sophie. In the way I make coffee in the morning, Sarah's way, always too strong. In the fact that I still sleep on my side of the bed, even though there's no reason to anymore. He pushed remains of his steak around his plate. The grief therapist Sophie's school made me see said that's normal. That loss doesn't end. You just learn to carry it differently. And have you learned to carry it? Some days, other days it crushes me. Today was a crushing day, which is why I was standing outside this restaurant ready to humiliate a stranger for grocery money. We all have crushing days. Lena's voice was quiet. Days when we make choices we swore we'd never make. When we compromise ourselves because the alternative seems worse. You're not unique in that, Ethan. You're just honest about it. Is that supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you feel human. Humans mess up. They make terrible choices under pressure. They agree to things they regret. But they also course correct. They tell the truth when they could lie. They choose decency even when it costs them. She met his eyes. You did that tonight. That counts for something. The waiter brought the check. Lena produced a credit card without looking at the total, waving away Ethan's protests. Consider it payment for honesty. God knows I've paid more for less valuable things. Outside, the rain had stopped. The street gleamed wet and clean, washed of the day's accumulated grime. Lena pulled on a coat designed to actually fit her instead of hanging awkwardly like most clothing did, a reminder that she had the resources to customize her world in ways Ethan never could. Thank you, he said, for dinner, for not hating me, for being kinder than I deserved. Thank you for being honest, for seeing me as a person instead of a problem or a project. She paused, seemed to consider something. Marcus will call you tomorrow. He'll want to know how it went. What will you tell him? The truth, that I couldn't do it, that I gave the money back. He won't like that. I don't care. In saying it, Ethan realized it was true. Whatever consequences came from refusing Marcus's money, he'd handle them. He'd handled worse. Lena smiled, small but real. Good. And Ethan? When things get desperate again, and they will because that's how life works, call me before you call Marcus. I might have work, real work, not degrading assignments. My building always needs maintenance, and I pay fair wages. She pressed a business card into his hand. Lena Brooks, Brooks Architecture and Design, followed by an address in Rittenhouse Square that made Ethan's current neighborhood look like a different city. I can't. You can. And you will. Because pride is expensive and your daughter needs you functional. She flagged down a passing taxi. Take care of yourself, Ethan Rowe. Take care of that little girl. And maybe remember that one bad night doesn't define you. What you do next does. The taxi pulled away, leaving Ethan alone on the sidewalk with a business card and the $600 he'd left on the restaurant table, now in his pocket again. Lena must have grabbed it before leaving. His phone buzzed. Marcus. How'd it go? She upset? Crying? Perfect. Send me pics if you got them. Payment tomorrow. Ethan typed quickly. I told her the truth. Gave the money back. Don't contact me again. The response came immediately. You're making a huge mistake, Ro. That money could have saved your ass. Hope your pride keeps you warm when you're on the street. Ethan blocked the number and started walking. He had a long way home, couldn't afford the bus fare tonight, but the rain had stopped and the air smelled clean, and for the first time in months, he felt like something other than a failure. Sophie was asleep when he got home, sprawled across the couch with a library book still open on her chest. Mrs. Chen from next door dozed in the armchair. She watched Sophie on nights when Ethan worked late, never asked for money because she knew he didn't have it, just accepted his help with her groceries and computer as payment. "How was it?" Mrs. Chen asked softly, gathering her things. "Different than expected. Maybe better. I don't know yet." Good different or bad different? Ethan looked at his daughter, at the peace on her sleeping face, at the life he was barely keeping together through stubbornness and luck. He thought about Lena's business card in his pocket, about the choice he'd made to be honest instead of paid. "Ask me tomorrow. Right now, I'm too tired to tell." Mrs. Chen patted his shoulder on her way out. Ethan locked the door behind her, scooped Sophie into his arms. She was getting too big for this, growing up too fast in an apartment too small for dreams, and carried her to the bedroom they shared. "Daddy?" Sophie's voice was muzzy with sleep. "Did you have a good time on your date?" "How did you know about that?" "Mrs. Chen said you were meeting someone nice. Was she nice?" Ethan tucked Sophie into bed, pulled the blanket up to her chin. "Yeah, baby. She was nice. Very nice." "Are you going to see her again?" "I don't know. Maybe. Would that be okay?" Sophie's eyes were already closing. "Yeah. You should have friends. You're always sad when you don't have friends." Ethan kissed her forehead, breathing in the strawberry shampoo smell of her hair, the only clean thing in their whole shabby life. "I love you, Sophie Bean, more than anything." "Love you more," she mumbled, and then she was gone, breathing deep and even. Ethan stood in the doorway watching her sleep. Tomorrow would bring the same problems. Bills he couldn't pay, a landlord running out of patience, a daughter who deserved better than cereal for dinner, and a father who took money to humiliate strangers. Tomorrow would be hard. But tonight, he'd told the truth. Tonight, he'd chosen decency over desperation. Tonight, he'd met someone who saw his worst moment and offered grace instead of judgment. It wasn't enough to fix anything, but it was something. And right now, something felt like everything. He pulled out Lena's business card, read it again in the dim light from the kitchen. Brooks Architecture and Design. A phone number. An address in a part of town where buildings didn't leak and children didn't go hungry. Tomorrow, maybe he'd call. Maybe he'd swallow his pride and ask for the work she'd offered. Maybe he'd take the first step toward something that wasn't survival but actual living. Or maybe he wouldn't. Maybe pride and shame would win like they always did, keeping him locked in patterns of barely getting by until barely became not at all. But tonight, in the quiet dark of a home that was almost not his anymore, Ethan Rowe allowed himself to hope. Just a little, just enough to imagine that maybe, things could be different. Outside, Philadelphia hummed with 1,000 other stories, 1,000 other desperate people making choices they'd regret or redeem. Ethan was just one more, but for the first time in 3 years, he felt like his story might not be finished yet. He set Lena's card on the kitchen counter where he'd see it in the morning. Then he lay down on the couch, couldn't afford the heating bill, so they shared the bedroom's small space heater, and closed his eyes. Sleep came slowly. But when it came, it was dreamless and clean, unburdened by the weight of lies he hadn't told and dignity he'd chosen to keep. It was a start. Tomorrow would tell him if it was enough. Morning came with the particular cruelty reserved for moments of fragile hope. Ethan woke on the couch to find an eviction notice slipped under his door. 30 days to vacate, no exceptions, no extensions. The landlord had finally run out of patience. He held the paper in shaking hands while Sophie ate cereal at their tiny kitchen table, humming something she'd learned at school, blissfully unaware that their world was ending in exactly 4 weeks. Lena's business card sat on the counter where he'd left it, a small white rectangle that represented either salvation or another kind of shame. Asking for help. Admitting he couldn't do this alone. Accepting charity disguised as employment from a woman he'd agreed to humiliate less than 12 hours ago. His pride said no. His daughter's humming said yes. He waited until Sophie left for school. Mrs. Chen walked her to the bus stop, another kindness he could never properly repay, before pulling out his phone. Lena's number glowed on the screen. His thumb hovered over it for a full minute before he forced himself to dial. She answered on the second ring. Brooks Architecture. It's Ethan. Ethan Rowe. From last night. I remember. I don't have that many dinner companions who confess to being paid to sabotage me. Her voice carried warmth beneath the professional tone. What can I do for you? You mentioned work, maintenance at your building. The words tasted like defeat and survival mixed together, impossible to separate. Is that offer still open? A pause, then, can you be here at 10? I'll show you what needs doing and we'll discuss terms. I'll be there. Ethan, don't bring your pride. It won't fit through the door. She hung up before he could respond. Ethan stared at his phone, unsure whether to laugh or throw something. Instead, he showered in water that ran cold after 30 seconds. Another bill he'd neglected too long, and put on the least worn of his work shirts. The bus to Rittenhouse Square took 40 minutes and cost money he didn't have to spare. But walking would have taken 2 hours and he couldn't afford to be late. Not today. Not when this job might be the difference between keeping Sophie and losing her to a system that would see his poverty as proof of failure rather than circumstance. Lena's building stood on a tree-lined street where the sidewalks were clean and the trash cans weren't overflowing and people walked their dogs without checking over their shoulders. It was a beautiful structure, pre-war construction with Art Deco details that developers would destroy in a heartbeat to build something modern and soulless and profitable. The stonework needed pointing, the brass fixtures needed polishing, and the front steps showed wear from decades of foot traffic. But it had good bones, the kind of place that deserved preservation. Lena waited in the lobby, dressed in work clothes that probably still cost more than Ethan's entire wardrobe, but at least weren't the formal dress from last night. She looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, but also more solid, more real. You came. You doubted me? I doubted your ability to overcome pride. Most people would rather starve than accept help. She gestured around the lobby. Welcome to Brooks Building. Built in 1928, 6 stories, 12 residential units, my architectural office on the ground floor. I inherited it from my grandmother 5 years ago. It's been home ever since. It's beautiful. It's crumbling, which is where you come in. She led him toward a service elevator, custom fitted with controls she could reach. The super quit last month, said he was tired of working for someone who had unrealistic expectations about quality. What he meant was he didn't like taking orders from a woman half his height who knew more about building systems than he did. The elevator groaned upward. Ethan noticed watermarks on the ceiling. Roof leak? 3 of them, plus the boilers on its last legs. Half the radiators in the building knock like they're possessed. And don't get me started on the electrical system. My grandmother refused to update anything, said it had character. I say it has code violations. And you want me to fix all this? I want you to help me save it. The elevator stopped on the 6th floor. Lena pulled open the gate with practiced ease. Marcus's agency has been pressuring me to sell for 2 years. They want to tear it down, build luxury condos, make a fortune. Every repair I can't afford, every system that fails, strengthens their argument that I should just give up and take their money. She led him down a hallway that smelled like old wood and lemon polish. But this building is my grandmother's legacy. She bought it in 1965 when women couldn't even get mortgages without a man's signature. She fought for it, maintained it, turned it into something beautiful. I'm not letting developers destroy it because I can't afford a decent maintenance person. They stopped at a door marked Roof Access. So here's my offer. 40 hours a week, $25 an hour. That's $1,000 a week, more than $4,000 a month. You handle maintenance, repairs, tenant requests. I'll teach you the building systems, and you'll work with me on the bigger renovation projects. In exchange, I get someone who actually cares whether this place survives. Ethan's mind spun numbers. $4,000 a month. That would cover rent with enough left over for food, utilities, maybe even getting ahead on bills instead of falling further behind. It was more than he'd made in 6 months of cobbled-together maintenance jobs. That's too much. Way too much for basic maintenance work. It's fair for what I'm asking. This isn't just fixing leaky faucets, Ethan. It's preservation work, detail work, You'll be learning alongside me, helping save something that matters. That's worth paying for. She pushed open the roof door. Sunlight flooded in. Besides, I can afford it. My architecture firm does well. The building's paid off. I'm not being charitable. I'm being smart. Good help is worth investing in. The roof spread before them, tar paper and gravel with 3 visible wet spots where water had pooled. The view stretched across Rittenhouse Square's bare November trees towards Center City's skyline. It was the kind of view that people paid millions for. Why me? Ethan asked. Why offer this to someone you met last night? Someone who admitted he'd agreed to humiliate you for money? Lena walked to the roof's edge, looking out over her small kingdom. Because you told the truth when lying would have been easier and more profitable. Because you're desperate enough to need this, but honest enough not to pretend otherwise. And because I've interviewed a dozen maintenance people who all talked to my chest instead of my face, who all called me sweetheart or little lady, who all made it clear they'd take my money while resenting every second of taking orders from me. She turned to face him. You looked me in the eye last night. You treated me like a person. You'd be amazed how rare that is. So yes, I'm offering you a job. Not out of pity, not as charity, but because I think we might both need what the other one has. You need stability. I need someone who sees buildings the way I do, as things worth saving. Ethan looked at the roof, at the building, at the woman who was offering him a lifeline disguised as employment. Every instinct screamed that this was too good, too easy, that there had to be a catch. Nothing in his life had ever been this straightforward. When can I start? Right now. There's a toolkit in the basement and a leak in 4B that Mrs. Patterson has been complaining about for 3 days. Fix that. Then we'll tackle the roof situation together. She extended her hand. Do we have a deal? Ethan shook her hand. Her grip was firm, professional, the handshake of someone who'd learned early that she had to project confidence in a world determined to underestimate her. We have a deal. Good. Now let's go save a building. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of pipe wrenches and plumbing tape, of Lena explaining building systems while Ethan relearned skills he hadn't used since before Sarah got sick. Mrs. Patterson's leak turned out to be a simple washer replacement, but it led to discovering corroded pipes that needed addressing before they burst completely. Lena worked alongside him, handing him tools, holding flashlights in tight spaces, explaining the building's quirks with the affection most people reserved for beloved pets. She knew every pipe, every wire, every structural beam by heart. This wasn't just a building to her. It was family. They broke for lunch around 2. Lena produced sandwiches from her office, good ones with actual ingredients instead of whatever was cheapest, and they ate in the lobby while she outlined the building's most urgent needs. The roof is priority 1, she said around a bite of turkey and Swiss. If we don't patch those leaks before winter really hits, we'll have ceiling damage in 3 apartments. Priority 2 is the boiler. It's functional but inefficient, and I'm worried it won't make it through February. Priority 3 is electrical upgrades. Nothing dangerous yet, but we're pushing the limits of a system designed for 1928 power consumption. That's easily 6 months of work, Ethan said. Maybe more. Which is why I'm hiring you full-time instead of bringing in contractors. They'd charge triple and care half as much. She pulled out a tablet, showed him spreadsheets and schedules. I've been planning this renovation for 2 years, learning everything I could about building preservation, getting permits, budgeting. I just needed the right person to help execute it. And you think I'm that person? Based on one disastrous dinner? I think you're someone who needs a second chance. And I think this building deserves someone who'll treat it with respect. She met his eyes. We're both good at seeing potential in broken things, Ethan. Buildings, people, whatever. Maybe that makes us a good team. Before Ethan could respond, the lobby door opened and a young woman entered, pulling a suitcase and looking around with evident confusion. She was maybe 25, with purple streaks in her dark hair and the kind of bohemian style that suggested art school and optimism. Can I help you? Lena asked, standing. I'm looking for apartment 3C. I'm supposed to move in today, but the previous tenant was supposed to leave keys with the super, and I was told there isn't one anymore, and I've been standing outside for 20 minutes trying to figure out who to call. The words tumbled out in a rush. I'm Jade Morrison. I signed a lease 3 weeks ago? Lena's expression shifted to professional welcome. Jade, yes, I apologize for the confusion. Our previous super left suddenly and we're in transition. I'm Lena Brooks, the owner. This is Ethan Rowe, our new building manager. We'll get you those keys right now. She disappeared into her office, leaving Ethan alone with the new tenant. Jade studied him with open curiosity. Building manager? That's fancy. You look more like a guy who fixes things. I fix things. That's pretty much the whole job description. Cool. Because the listing said 3C has character, which usually means things are broken, but charming. She grinned. I'm a digital artist, work from home, so I'll probably be bothering you about the Wi-Fi situation constantly. Lena returned with keys and a welcome packet. Everything you need is in here. Trash day is Thursday, quiet hours after 10, and if you have maintenance issues, Ethan's your first contact. His number's in the packet. Jade accepted the keys like they were treasure. This is amazing. You have no idea. I've been living in a studio in West Philly with 3 roommates and walls so thin I could hear the neighbors breathe. Having my own place feels like a miracle. Well, welcome to Brooks Building, Lena said warmly. If you need anything, we're both usually around during business hours. They watched Jade disappear into the elevator, humming happily. Lena turned to Ethan with a small smile. That's the part they don't tell you about building management. It's not just pipes and wires, it's people, their homes, their lives. Every repair matters because someone's depending on it working. Is that why you won't sell? The people? Partly, but mostly because my grandmother used to say buildings have souls. The ones people actually love and care for, they develop personalities, character. They become part of the neighborhood story. She ran her hand along the lobby's oak paneling, worn smooth by decades of touch. This place has soul. Tearing it down to build something modern and expensive would be like erasing history. Even if the history is leaky and outdated? Especially then. Perfect things don't have stories. Broken things that get fixed and loved anyway? Those have the best stories of all. Ethan thought about his own broken life, about Sophie and eviction notices, and nights spent wondering how he'd gotten so far from the person he'd meant to be. Is that what you're doing? Fixing broken things? I'm trying. Buildings are easier than people, though. They follow rules. You patch a leak, it stops leaking. You replace a pipe, water flows. People are messier. But worth fixing? Lena considered this. Some people, the ones who want to be fixed, the ones who'll put in the work. She looked at him directly. You want to be fixed, Ethan? I want to be the kind of father Sophie deserves. I want to be someone who doesn't have to choose between dignity and dinner. He trailed off, unsure how to articulate the shape of the life he'd lost. I want to stop surviving and start living. Then let's start with showing up, every day, doing the work. The rest follows from that. She checked her watch. It's almost 3. Don't you need to pick up Sophie from school? The bus drops her at our building. Mrs. Chen watches her until I get home. Bring her here tomorrow. There's a tenant lounge on the 2nd floor with good light and comfortable chairs. She can do homework while you work. Better than her being alone or imposing on your neighbor. I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm offering. Part of the job is making it sustainable for you. Can't fix buildings if you're stressed about childcare. Lena's tone was matter of fact, brooking no argument. Besides, this place is quiet in the afternoons. She won't bother anyone. Ethan felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. Thank you. Thank me by fixing Mrs. Patterson's leak so she stops calling me at midnight. Now go home. Tomorrow we start early on that roof. The bus ride home felt different than the morning's journey. Ethan had a job, real employment with steady hours and decent pay. In his pocket was an advance Lena had insisted on, $500 to get through until the first real paycheck. He'd protested. She'd told him to shut up and take it. He had. Sophie was doing homework at the kitchen table when he arrived. Mrs. Chen supervising with the patience of a grandmother who'd raised 6 children of her own. How was the job? Mrs. Chen asked. Good. Really good. Starting tomorrow for real. He pulled out $200 of the advance for watching Sophie. I know you say you don't need it, but I need to pay you something. Mrs. Chen pushed the money back. You fixed my sink last week. We're even. That was 10 minutes of work. And this is what neighbors do. We help each other. You'll pay me back someday when I need help. You can give. She patted his cheek with a weathered hand. I'm glad you found work. You're a good man, Ethan. Good men deserve good things. After she left, Sophie looked up from her math worksheet with serious eyes. Daddy, are we going to be okay now? The question hit him harder than any eviction notice. She knew. Of course she knew. Children always knew when their world was unstable, when the adults around them were barely holding together. Yeah, baby. We're going to be okay. He sat beside her, helped her work through long division problems. I got a really good job. We'll be able to stay in our apartment, keep the lights on, maybe even get some new things you need. Like shoes that fit? His heart cracked. Like shoes that fit. And birthday parties. And maybe even a trip to the zoo like you've been asking for. Sophie threw her arms around his neck. I knew you'd fix it. You fix everything. If only that were true. But looking at his daughter's trusting face, Ethan decided maybe he could become the person she believed him to be. Maybe showing up every day and doing the work would be enough. Maybe broken things really could be fixed if you cared enough to try. That night, after Sophie was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table and looked at the eviction notice. 30 days to vacate. But now he had options. With his first paycheck, he could negotiate with the landlord, prove he could catch up on back rent, demonstrate stability. Or maybe, the thought arrived tentatively, maybe he could find somewhere better, somewhere Sophie could have her own room instead of sharing with him. Somewhere the heat worked and the water ran hot, and the walls didn't have water stains from leaks the landlord refused to fix. He pulled out his phone and opened the email Lena had sent with his official employment paperwork. Under benefits, she'd listed something he'd missed earlier. Housing assistance available for key employees. Inquire for details. He stared at those words for a long time. Housing assistance. Another kindness disguised as policy. Another hand reaching out to pull him towards solid ground. His pride said he'd taken enough. His daughter's sleeping form in the next room said pride was expensive. He typed a careful email. Lena, saw the note about housing assistance in the benefits package. Would like to discuss if the offer's real. Current living situation is complicated. Thank you, Ethan. The response came within minutes. Very real. One of my tenants is moving to Boston next month. 2 BR in this building, below market rate for employees. We'll talk tomorrow. Sleep well. Ethan read the message 3 times, waiting for the catch to reveal itself. But all he found was straightforward kindness from someone who understood what it meant to need help and be too proud to ask for it. He walked to the bedroom, looked at Sophie, sprawled across the bed they shared, one arm flung over her stuffed rabbit. She deserved her own space, her own room where she could be a kid instead of accommodating her father's failure. I'm going to fix this, he whispered. I promise, Sophie Bean. I'm going to give you the life you deserve. The apartment creaked around him, settling into its nightly sounds. Outside, sirens wailed, the constant soundtrack of their neighborhood where poverty and desperation lived in close quarters. But tomorrow, he'd take Sophie to work with him. Tomorrow she'd do her homework in a beautiful building in a safe neighborhood. Tomorrow would be different. And the day after that. And the day after that. Until different became normal, and normal became good, and good became the life Sarah had made him promise to give their daughter. He could do this. He would do this. One fixed pipe, one repaired roof, one day at a time. The next 3 months passed in a rhythm Ethan had forgotten existed. Steady work, regular paychecks, days that built on each other instead of barely surviving one crisis before the next arrived. He woke before dawn, got Sophie ready for school, then headed to Brooks Building, where the work was endless but manageable, challenging but not crushing. Lena proved to be an exacting boss, but a fair one, expecting excellence while teaching him everything she knew about historic preservation and building systems. Sophie took to the tenant lounge like she'd discovered her own private kingdom. After school, she'd settle into the oversized armchair by the window, spreading homework and library books across the coffee table while Ethan worked through his task list. The other tenants adopted her almost immediately. Mrs. Patterson brought cookies on Tuesdays, Jade taught her digital art basics on slow afternoons, and Mr. Reeves in 5A, a retired literature professor, started an informal reading club that consisted of him and Sophie discussing whatever book she'd discovered that week. The apartment in 2B became available right on the schedule. Lena offered it at a rate that was almost insulting in its generosity. $1,200 a month for a two-bedroom with original hardwood floors, working radiators, and windows that actually kept the cold out. Ethan's pride fought him for a full day before Sophie's excitement about having her own room made the decision for him. They moved in on a Saturday, with Jade and Mr. Reeves helping carry boxes up one flight of stairs instead of the 4 floors they'd climbed at the old place. Sophie had cried when she saw her new bedroom, not the sad tears Ethan had become too familiar with, but the overwhelmed kind that came from unexpected joy. It was small, just enough room for a bed and dresser, and the bookshelf Mr. Reeves had donated, but the window looked out on Rittenhouse Square's trees and the walls were painted a soft blue that caught morning light like water. "Is this really ours?" she'd asked, standing in the center of the empty room with her arms spread wide. "We get to stay here? As long as we need to, baby." "Forever?" Ethan had glanced at Lena, who was directing the furniture arrangement with the precision of someone who thought about spatial relationships professionally. She caught his look and smiled slightly. "Forever's a long time," he told Sophie. "How about we start with today and see how it goes?" That had been 6 weeks ago. Now Sophie's room was filled with her personality, drawings taped to the walls, books stacked everywhere, the organized chaos of a 7-year-old who finally had space to spread out. The apartment smelled like home instead of mildew and desperation. Ethan slept through the night for the first time in 3 years. But with stability came proximity. And proximity to Lena Brooks was proving complicated in ways he hadn't anticipated. She was there every day, working in her office or consulting on building projects, always professional but increasingly present in his daily routine. They developed patterns, coffee together before the morning work began, lunch breaks spent reviewing renovation plans, evening walks through the building to check on completed repairs. Conversations that started about plumbing evolved into discussions about architecture, about Philadelphia's history, about the small observations that made life interesting. Ethan learned that Lena took her coffee black, that she had perfect pitch and could identify any note played on the building's old piano, that she'd wanted to be a dancer before growth hormone deficiency had made that dream impossible. She learned that he'd studied engineering before dropping out when Sarah got pregnant, that he could fix almost anything if he had the right tools and enough time, that he still wore his wedding ring even though Sarah had been gone 3 years. The wedding ring became a problem on a cold afternoon in late February. They were working together in the basement, wrestling with the ancient boiler that chose the coldest week of winter to start making concerning noises. Lena was wedged into a tight space behind the boiler, calling out pressure readings while Ethan adjusted valves. "Try now," she said. Ethan turned the valve. Steam hissed. The pressure gauge climbed into the green zone and held steady. "That's it. We got it." Lena backed out of the tight space, stood up, and immediately swayed. Ethan caught her before she fell, his arms going around her waist instinctively. For a moment they stood frozen, closer than they'd ever been, close enough that he could see gold flecks in her brown eyes and count the freckles across her nose and smell the lavender soap she used. Her hands had landed on his chest for balance. Neither of them moved. "Sorry," Lena said finally, stepping back. Head rush from standing up too fast. "You okay?" "Fine. Just stood up too fast." But her voice sounded different, careful, measured, like she was choosing each word deliberately. Ethan became aware of his hands still hovering near her waist, of the space between them that suddenly felt charged with something neither acknowledged. He pulled back, wiped his palms on his work pants. "We should, test the heat distribution. Make sure all the radiators are getting pressure." "Right, good idea." Lena was already moving toward the basement stairs, putting distance between them with purposeful steps. They didn't talk about it. They went through this building checking radiators, discussing BTU outputs and heat distribution patterns, being aggressively normal about the whole situation. But something had shifted. Some unspoken acknowledgement that they'd both felt something in that moment and neither knew what to do about it. That evening, after Sophie was asleep, Ethan sat in his new living room and stared at his wedding ring. He'd worn it every day since Sarah died, a reminder of promises made and a life he'd lost. Taking it off felt like betrayal. Keeping it on felt like living in the past. He was still staring at it when someone knocked on his door. Lena stood in the hallway, still in her work clothes but with her coat on, clearly about to leave for the night. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. "Sure, come in." She stepped into the apartment but didn't sit, just stood near the door like she might need to make a quick exit. I wanted to apologize for earlier in the basement. I made things awkward. You didn't make anything awkward. You got lightheaded. I caught you. That's it. That's not it. Lena met his eyes directly, the way she always did. And we both know it. So I'm going to be honest because I've learned that's the only thing that works with you. I like you, Ethan, more than I should. More than is probably smart given that you work for me and live in my building and are still wearing your wedding ring 3 years after your wife died. Ethan's hand went instinctively to the ring. Lena, let me finish. I know you're not ready. Maybe you won't ever be ready, and that's fine. You lost someone you loved, and grief doesn't follow a schedule. But I needed to say it out loud so we can both acknowledge it and move past it. I won't make things uncomfortable. I won't cross professional boundaries. I just needed you to know that if circumstances were different, if you were ready, I would... She trailed off, shook her head. Never mind. Forget I said anything. She turned toward the door. Ethan stood up quickly. Wait, don't go, please. Lena paused but didn't turn around. You're right, Ethan said quietly. About all of it. I do still love Sarah. I probably always will. But lately I've been noticing that thinking about her doesn't hurt quite as much as it used to. That whole days go by where I'm not drowning in grief. That I laugh at things and mean it and don't feel guilty afterward. He took a breath. And yeah, I've noticed you. How could I not? You're brilliant and kind, and you see things in me I forgot were there. You make me want to be better. Not for you exactly, but because being around you reminds me that I used to be someone who had ambitions beyond survival. Lena turned around slowly. Her expression was guarded, careful. But I'm not ready, Ethan continued. I don't know when I will be. Maybe never. And it's not fair to you to ask you to wait around for me to figure out how to be a person again, instead of just a father scrambling to keep things together. I didn't ask you to be ready. I just needed to be honest. I know, and I appreciate it, but I need to be honest too. I can't give you what you deserve right now. I'm still learning how to live in a world where Sarah doesn't exist. I'm still figuring out how to be Ethan instead of Sarah's widower. Adding anything else to that would be unfair to everyone, especially Sophie. Lena nodded slowly. Okay, I understand, and for what it's worth, I wasn't suggesting we run off into the sunset together. I just wanted you to know where I stood so we could stop dancing around it. Where do we go from here? Same place we've been going. You fix buildings. I save them. We're colleagues and maybe friends. Anything else waits until you're ready, if you ever are. She managed a small smile. I'm patient. Kinda have to be when you're trying to preserve a 90-year-old building that fights you on every renovation. I don't deserve your patience. Probably not, but you're getting it anyway. She opened the door. See you tomorrow, Ethan. Same time, same broken building. After she left, Ethan sat back down and looked at his wedding ring again. Sarah's voice came to him, not a memory exactly, but an echo of her pragmatic wisdom. She'd made him promise 2 things before she died. Take care of Sophie and don't waste his life mourning her. He'd managed the first. The second had proven harder. He twisted the ring around his finger, felt the worn gold that had circled his hand through marriage and fatherhood and grief. Taking it off wouldn't erase Sarah. She'd always be Sophie's mother, his first love, the woman who'd shaped him into someone capable of loyalty and sacrifice. But keeping it on while developing feelings for someone else felt dishonest to everyone involved. Slowly, carefully, he slid the ring off his finger. The skin beneath was paler, marked by 3 years of constant wear. He looked at the ring for a long moment, then opened his bedside drawer and placed it inside, next to the photo of Sarah he kept there. I'll always love you, he whispered to the photo, but I think you'd want me to try living again. So I'm going to try. Slowly. Carefully. But I'm going to try. The next morning, Lena noticed immediately. She looked at his bare ring finger, looked at his face, and nodded slightly without saying anything. They drank their coffee and discussed the day's work and acted like nothing had changed, even though they both knew everything had. March arrived with unpredictable weather, snow one day, spring warmth the next. The city caught between seasons like Ethan was caught between grief and possibility. The roof project was finally complete, with new tar paper and proper drainage that would keep the building dry through whatever weather came. The boiler limped through its last winter season, scheduled for replacement before next fall. Small repairs multiplied into larger improvements, the building slowly transforming under their combined effort. Sophie turned 8 on a Tuesday. Ethan threw her a party in the tenant lounge, her first real birthday party since Sarah died. Mrs. Patterson made a cake, Jade organized games, Mr. Reeves read dramatic excerpts from Sophie's favorite books in voices that made everyone laugh. Lena arrived with a gift wrapped in architectural blueprints instead of regular paper. "It's perfect," Sophie declared after tearing into it. "A drafting kit with pencils and rulers and graph paper. Now I can design buildings like you." "Well, you'll need to study hard and go to college," Lena said. "But this is a good start." Sophie hugged her fiercely, the way children hug people they trust completely. Over Sophie's head, Lena caught Ethan's eye. Something passed between them. Acknowledgement of the moment, of how far they'd both come from that disastrous dinner 5 months ago, of the quiet domestic scene they'd somehow built together without planning to. After the party, after Sophie crashed into bed exhausted and happy, Ethan found Lena in her office reviewing building plans. She looked up when he knocked. "Hey, good party." "Thank you for the gift. You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to. She's a good kid. Smart, curious. Reminds me of myself at that age, always asking questions about how things worked." Lena set down her pencil. "Did you need something?" Ethan stepped inside, closed the door behind him. "I wanted to talk about what you said last month, about liking me." Lena's expression became carefully neutral. "Ethan, you don't have to." "I took off my ring." Silence. Lena looked at his bare finger, then back at his face. "I noticed. I'm not ready yet. I need you to understand that. But I'm working on it. I'm trying to figure out how to be someone who can move forward instead of just surviving. And I wanted you to know that when I am ready, if I ever am, I'd like to see where this could go. With you." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because watching Sophie tonight, seeing her happy in a home that feels safe, with people who care about her, I realized Sarah would be glad. She'd want this for Sophie, for me. She made me promise not to waste my life mourning her, and I've been breaking that promise for 3 years. He moved closer. "I don't know what I can offer you. I'm still broken in a lot of ways, still figuring out basic things like how to feel happy without guilt. But I wanted you to know I'm trying." Lena stood up, walked around her desk until she stood directly in front of him. Even with her custom shoes, the top of her head barely reached his chest. She had to tilt her head back to look at him properly. "I don't need you to be fixed, Ethan. I just need you to be honest. To tell me what you can and can't do. To not promise things you're not ready to give." She reached up, touched his face gently. "I've spent my whole life with people making assumptions about what I can and can't handle based on my size. Don't do that to me. Trust me to decide what I'm willing to wait for. And if I'm never ready, then we stay colleagues and friends, and I'll live with it. But I don't think that's where this is heading. I think you're scared. I think you're worried that moving forward means leaving Sarah behind, but grief and growth aren't mutually exclusive." Her hand dropped. "Take whatever time you need. I'm not going anywhere." "How can you be so patient?" "Practice. I've spent 34 years navigating a world designed for people twice my height. Patience stops being a virtue and becomes a survival skill." She smiled. "Besides, you're worth waiting for. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." On impulse, Ethan leaned down and kissed her forehead. Brief, chaste, but deliberate. When he straightened, Lena's eyes were bright. "What was that for?" "For being you, for seeing me, for not giving up on broken things that are worth saving." "Buildings or people?" "Both." Spring truly arrived in April, bringing green to Rittenhouse Square's trees and warmth to afternoons that had been frozen for months. The building's renovation continued. New electrical wiring in the common areas, restored hardwood in the hallways, small touches that honored the building's history while making it functional for modern life. Ethan worked alongside electricians and carpenters, learning trades he'd only dabbled in before, building skills that made him valuable beyond basic maintenance. Lena trusted him with increasingly complex projects. They spent long hours discussing design philosophy, debating the line between preservation and improvement, arguing good-naturedly about whether original fixtures mattered more than energy efficiency. She pushed him to think beyond repairs to transformation, to see buildings as living things that evolved while maintaining their essential character. That's what good architecture does, she explained one afternoon while they reviewed plans for upgrading the building's facade. It respects the past while serving the present. It doesn't erase history, but it doesn't get trapped by it either. Buildings that survive are the ones that adapt. Sounds like people. Everything sounds like people if you look at it right. She marked something on the plans with her red pencil. We're all just trying to preserve our good parts while fixing what's broken. Buildings are just more honest about it. They can't hide structural damage behind fresh paint. Can't people? Lena looked at him seriously. Not from anyone who knows what to look for. Cracks always show eventually. Better to address them before they compromise the whole foundation. He knew she wasn't just talking about buildings anymore. They were good at this, having two conversations at once, the surface one about architecture and the deeper one about everything they weren't quite ready to say directly. Sophie noticed the shift between them before anyone else did. Children always noticed what adults tried to hide. One night during dinner in their apartment, she looked between Ethan and Lena, who'd been invited to join them for spaghetti, with the serious expression she wore when working through complicated math problems. "Are you and Daddy dating?" she asked Lena directly. Lena didn't miss a beat. "No, we're friends and colleagues. Why do you ask?" "Because you look at each other the way people do in movies before they kiss." Ethan nearly choked on his water. "Sophie, it's okay to like her, Daddy. Mom would want you to be happy. She told me that before she died. She said you'd probably meet someone new someday, and I should be nice to them because you deserve to be happy." The room went silent. Ethan stared at his daughter, this small person who carried wisdom he'd forgotten existed. "She said that?" "Yeah, when you were sleeping in the hospital chair and it was just us. She said lots of stuff. About taking care of you, about growing up strong, about how love doesn't run out just because someone dies." Sophie twirled spaghetti on her fork with studied casualness. "I like Lena. She's smart and she's nice to us, and she makes you smile like you used to before Mom got sick. So if you want to date her, that's okay with me." Lena was very quiet, her eyes suspiciously bright. Ethan reached across the table and squeezed Sophie's hand. "Thank you, baby. That means a lot." "So are you going to ask her on a real date? Not just eating spaghetti in our apartment?" "Sophie, I think that's between your father and me," Lena interjected gently, "but I appreciate you being so welcoming. Not every kid would be." "Well, you're not like other grown-ups. Most grown-ups talk down to me because I'm little. You talk to me normal, like I'm a real person who can understand things." Sophie looked at her seriously. "And people who treat kids like people are usually good people. So I figured you were okay." After dinner, after Sophie went to do homework, Lena helped Ethan clean up. They worked in comfortable silence, falling into the rhythm they'd developed over months of proximity. "She's amazing," Lena said finally. "Sophie, you've done an incredible job with her. She's her mother's daughter. All the best parts of Sarah survived in her. And the best parts of you. The kindness, the work ethic, the integrity, even when it costs you." Lena dried a plate slowly. "For what it's worth, I think Sarah was right. Love doesn't run out, and being happy doesn't dishonor her memory. It fulfills the promise you made to take care of yourself and Sophie." "When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just familiar with loss. My parents died in a car accident when I was 12. I lived with my grandmother after that in this building, learning about architecture and resilience and how to build a life from broken pieces." She set down the dish towel. "Grandmother used to say that surviving tragedy doesn't make you tragic. It makes you someone who knows how precious good things are. Someone who doesn't waste opportunities for happiness." Ethan turned to face her fully. "Would you like to have dinner with me? A real date, just the two of us. Somewhere nice." "Are you sure you're ready?" "No, but I don't think I'll ever feel completely ready. Sometimes you just have to move forward and trust that you'll figure it out as you go." Lena smiled. The full, genuine smile she saved for moments of real joy. "Then yes, I'd like that very much." "Saturday night?" "Perfect. I know a place. Great food, reasonable prices, and the staff treats everyone with dignity regardless of height." She reached up and straightened his collar unnecessarily. It's a date. Saturday arrived with the kind of nervous energy Ethan hadn't felt since his first date with Sarah 12 years ago. He stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the 5th time, wondering when he'd become the kind of man who got anxious about dinner with a woman who'd seen him covered in boiler grease and drywall dust for 6 months straight. Sophie appeared in the doorway, already in her pajamas, even though it was only 6 o'clock. Mrs. Chen had agreed to stay with her for the evening, probably thrilled to see Ethan finally moving forward with his life. "You look nice, Daddy, like you're going somewhere important." "Just dinner with Lena. Your first real date." Sophie grinned with the satisfaction of someone who'd predicted exactly this outcome. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified." "Why? You already know she likes you, and you talk to her every day. It's just dinner in a different place." "When did you get so smart about relationships?" "I read a lot. Books teach you stuff." She came into the bathroom, stood on the step stool Sarah had installed years ago so she could reach the sink. "Mom used to get nervous before dates with you too, even after you were married. She said it meant she still cared about making a good impression." Ethan's chest tightened. "You remember that?" "I remember lots of things. Not everything, but the important stuff." Sophie looked at him seriously in the mirror. "It's okay to be happy, Daddy. Mom would want it. I want it. You've been sad for so long." He turned and pulled her into a hug, this small person who'd inherited her mother's wisdom and somehow become his anchor through years of drowning. "I love you, Sophie Bean. Love you more. Now go pick up Lena before you're late. Mrs. Chen brought cookies and promised to let me stay up until you get home so I can hear all about it." The restaurant Lena had chosen was in Old City, tucked into a converted colonial building with exposed brick and soft lighting that made everything look warmly intimate. Ethan arrived 5 minutes early, partly from nerves and partly from the habits of a man who'd learned that punctuality mattered when you couldn't afford to lose opportunities. Lena was already there, seated at a corner table wearing a deep red dress that looked nothing like her usual work clothes. She'd done something different with her hair, swept it back to show small silver earrings that caught the candlelight. She looked beautiful in a way that made Ethan's breath catch, not because of any single feature, but because of the complete picture of her. Confident, elegant, entirely herself without apology. She smiled when she saw him. "You're early. Couldn't be late for our first real date. That would be terrible form." He sat across from her, suddenly aware of how public this was, how different from their usual comfortable proximity in the building. "You look incredible. You clean up pretty well yourself. I'd almost forgotten what you look like without plaster dust in your hair." She passed him a menu. "I already ordered wine. Hope that's okay. They have an excellent Chianti." "Perfect." Ethan scanned the menu, relieved to find prices that were reasonable without being cheap. He could afford this on his new salary without the sick feeling that had accompanied every expense for the past 3 years. "So this is weird, right? Being here instead of arguing about pipe fittings in the basement?" "A little weird. Good weird, though." Lena accepted a wine glass from the waiter, waited for Ethan to get his before continuing. "I wasn't sure you'd actually go through with it. Thought you might panic and cancel." "I considered it. Around 3 o'clock this afternoon when the full weight of 'I'm going on a date' hit me. But then Sophie gave me a pep talk about how Mom would want me to be happy, and I realized I was being ridiculous." Sophie's remarkably well-adjusted for a kid who lost her mother so young. She has her moments, nights when she cries and won't say why, days when she's angry at the world for taking Sarah away. But yeah, mostly she's doing okay. Better than me, certainly. Ethan took a sip of wine. "You mentioned losing your parents when you were 12. Was it hard, growing up with your grandmother instead?" "Hard doesn't quite cover it. 12 is old enough to understand what you've lost, but young enough to feel completely powerless about it. My grandmother did her best, but she was grieving too. Her only child gone suddenly, leaving behind a granddaughter with dwarfism that she didn't fully understand how to navigate." Lena rotated her wine glass slowly. "She loved me fiercely, but she also worried constantly. Worried about my health, my future, whether I'd be able to take care of myself. Sometimes love and worry get tangled up until you can't separate them." "Is that why you became an architect? To prove you could take care of yourself?" "Partly. Also because I love buildings. Still do. They're permanent in a way people aren't. You can pour your whole heart into a structure and it'll stand for decades, centuries even, long after you're gone. There's comfort in that. Creating something that outlasts you. The waiter returned for their orders. They chose quickly, both comfortable enough with silence that they didn't need to fill every moment with conversation. When the waiter left, Lena leaned back and studied Ethan with the directness he'd come to expect from her. Can I ask you something? And I want you to be completely honest. Always. Why now? What changed between last month when you said you weren't ready and this week when you asked me out? Ethan considered the question carefully. Sophie's birthday party. Watching her so happy, surrounded by people who care about her in this building we've made into a home, I realized we'd already built something together without planning to. A life. A community. And I thought about Sarah's promise, about not wasting my life mourning her, and I understood that moving forward wasn't betraying her memory. It was honoring it. She loved fully and lived fully even when she knew she was dying. Not doing the same would be the real betrayal. That's a good answer. It's an honest one. I still have moments of guilt. Moments where being happy feels wrong because Sarah isn't here to be happy too. But they're getting fewer. And I hope, that eventually I'll be able to hold both things at once. Missing her and building something new. Lena reached across the table, touched his hand briefly. You already are. Every day you show up and do the work and take care of Sophie and help save that building, you're building something new. You just haven't been calling it that. Their food arrived, giving them something to focus on besides the emotional weight of the conversation. They talked about easier things, favorite books, terrible movies they loved anyway, childhood memories that didn't involve loss. Lena told stories about growing up in Brooks Building, about her grandmother teaching her to see beauty in architectural details most people missed. Ethan talked about his brief time in engineering school, about discovering he loved working with his hands more than working with equations. You should go back, Lena said suddenly. To school. Finish your degree. I'm 32 with a daughter and a full-time job. When exactly would I find time for college? Online classes, part-time enrollment. It would take longer, but you could do it. And with your practical experience, you'd actually understand the applications instead of just the theory. She cut into her chicken deliberately. I'd support it. Flexible work hours, study time built into your schedule. You're too smart to spend your whole life just doing repairs. You could design systems, consult on preservation projects, actually build a career instead of just a job. Why would you do that? Invest in my education when I could just leave for better opportunities once I had the degree. Because investing in people is always worth it, even if they don't stay. And because I'm selfish, having a building manager with an engineering degree would be a massive asset. She smiled. But mostly because you deserve the chance to become whoever you were supposed to be before life got in the way. Consider it payment for all those times you've stayed late fixing emergencies without complaining. Ethan shook his head, overwhelmed by the casual way she discussed transforming his life. You barely know me. We've worked together 6 months. That's not enough time to make this kind of investment in someone. I know you well enough. I know you show up every day even when you're exhausted. I know you treat my building like it's precious because you understand what it means to me. I know you're honest even when lying would be easier and more profitable. I know you're a good father who puts his daughter's needs before his own pride. Lena met his eyes steadily. That's enough. More than enough. The rest of dinner passed in comfortable conversation, the awkwardness of early dating dissolving into the familiar ease they'd developed over months of working together. By the time dessert arrived, tiramisu they agreed to share, Ethan had relaxed enough to forget he was supposed to be nervous. This was nice, he said, as they walked out into the spring evening. Different from our usual routine, but nice. Different good or different weird? Different good. Definitely good. He offered his arm without thinking. She took it naturally, her hand fitting into the crook of his elbow like it belonged there. They walked toward Rittenhouse Square slowly, neither ready for the evening to end. The square was quiet, just a few couples walking dogs and a homeless man settling onto a bench with his shopping cart of belongings. Ethan thought about how different his life looked now compared to 6 months ago, when he'd stood outside Romano's contemplating how far he'd fallen. He'd been one crisis away from becoming that man on the bench, from losing everything that mattered. "You're thinking too hard," Lena observed. "I can practically hear the gears turning. Just remembering, the night we met, how desperate I was, how close I came to doing something I'd never have forgiven myself for. But you didn't. You chose differently. That's what matters." "Well, only because you made it impossible to go through with it. You saw right through me." "I've had practice seeing through people's masks. When you're different the way I am, you learn early that most people lie about what they really think. They smile while looking down on you, offer help that's really condescension, treat you like inspiration porn for their own emotional benefit." She paused by a bench, sat down carefully. "You were the first person in years who looked at me like I was just a person, not a tragedy, not inspiration, not a curiosity, just someone sitting across a table." Ethan sat beside her. "That's a low bar for basic human decency. You'd be surprised how many people can't clear it." She looked up at the trees, their branches dark against the amber glow of streetlights. "My grandmother used to bring me here when I was little. We'd sit on this exact bench and she'd point out architectural details on the buildings around the square. 'That one's Beaux-Arts. That one's Art Deco. That one's a terrible modern addition that should be demolished.' She taught me to see the city as a collection of stories told in brick and stone." "Is that why you won't sell the building? Because it's her story?" "It's more than that. It's also mine. The life I built there, the work I do, the community we've created with good tenants who treat each other with respect. Marcus's agency would tear all that down for profit. They'd displace everyone, destroy something beautiful, and replace it with generic luxury condos that nobody who actually lives in this neighborhood could afford." Her voice carried quiet steel. "I won't let that happen. Not while I can still fight. Even if fighting costs you? Especially then. Things worth having are worth fighting for. My grandmother taught me that too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city settle into night. Somewhere nearby, a church bell tolled 9 times. Ethan knew he should get home, relieve Mrs. Chen, check on Sophie, but he wasn't ready to let go of this moment yet. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said quietly. "About Sarah. If it's too personal, you can tell me to shut up." "Ask. Do you think she'd approve of me? Of us? Whatever this is becoming?" Ethan thought about Sarah, her fierce love, her pragmatic wisdom, the way she'd made him promise to move forward even as she was leaving him behind. "She'd like you. She always appreciated people who said what they meant and did what they said. No games, no pretense. You're exactly the kind of person she'd want in Sophie's life, in my life." "That's good to know. I wasn't sure if I should worry about competing with a memory." "You're not competing. Sarah was Sarah. You're you. They're completely different things." He shifted to look at her directly. "I loved her completely, but she's gone, and I'm still here. And she made me promise not to waste that. Being with you doesn't diminish what I had with her. It's just different, new, scary as hell, honestly." "Good scary or bad scary?" "Both. Mostly good." He reached over, took her hand carefully. Her fingers were small but strong, calloused from years of working with tools and drafting pencils. "I'm going to mess this up sometimes. I'm going to have bad days where grief hits me sideways. I'm going to be more broken than you bargained for. I'll mess up too. I'll be too independent and push you away when I should let you help. I'll have days where decades of being treated differently makes me prickly and defensive even when you don't deserve it. I'll be more complicated than you bargained for." She squeezed his hand. "We're both broken in different ways. Maybe that's okay. Maybe broken people who are honest about it make better partners than perfect people who pretend." They stood up together, still holding hands, and walked back toward Brooks' building. The lights in the tenant windows glowed warmly, making the whole structure look alive and welcoming. Home, Ethan thought. Somewhere along the way, that building had become home in a way his and Sarah's old apartment never could have been after she died. At the building's entrance, Lena paused. "I had a really good time tonight." "Me too. Want to do it again sometime?" "Definitely. Though maybe next time we could just have dinner in one of our apartments like normal people who are too busy renovating buildings to go out all the time." Ethan laughed. "That's possibly the least romantic thing anyone's ever said at the end of a first date." "I'm practical. Sue me." But she was smiling, eyes bright with happiness that made her look younger. Thank you for taking a chance on this. On us. I know it wasn't easy. Best difficult decision I've made in a long time. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Their first kiss was soft, tentative, testing the waters of something neither was quite ready for, but both wanted anyway. When they pulled apart, Lena's cheeks were flushed. That was, yeah. So we're doing this? Actually trying? I think we've been trying for months. We're just being honest about it now. She grinned. Honesty. What a novel concept in a relationship. Ethan kissed her once more, quick and sweet, then stepped back. I should get upstairs. Sophie's probably wearing Mrs. Chen out with questions about whether we kissed yet. Did we pass inspection? With flying colors. See you Monday? See you Monday. But neither of them moved for a long moment, reluctant to end the evening despite knowing it had to end eventually. Finally, Lena pulled out her keys. Go take care of your daughter. I'll be here tomorrow if you want to not date some more over building maintenance. It's a plan. Upstairs, Sophie was indeed still awake, curled up on the couch with Mrs. Chen while some animated movie played on the television. She looked up when Ethan entered, eyes sharp with curiosity. How was it? Good, really good. Did you kiss her? Mrs. Chen laughed. Sophie, we don't interrogate your father about his personal life. It's okay, Ethan said. And yes, we kissed. Happy? Sophie's grin could have lit the whole apartment. Very. Does this mean she's your girlfriend now? It means we're figuring things out, taking it slow, being honest with each other about what we can and can't do. That sounds very grown up and boring. Sophie yawned dramatically. I'm glad you're happy, Daddy. You deserve good things. After Mrs. Chen left and Sophie was finally in bed, Ethan stood in his living room looking at the life they'd built in this space. Sophie's artwork covered one wall. Books filled shelves they'd assembled together. The kitchen smelled like the cookies Mrs. Chen had brought, sweet and domestic and normal. Normal. When had his life become normal again? When had survival transformed into actual living? He pulled out his phone and texted Lena. Thank you for tonight. For patience. For seeing past the mess I was to the person I'm trying to become. Her response came quickly. Thank you for trusting me with your mess. For being brave enough to try. Sleep well. He did sleep well, better than he had in years, untroubled by the guilt that had shadowed every moment of potential happiness since Sarah's death. In the morning, he woke to sunlight streaming through windows that actually sealed properly, and the sound of Sophie singing in her room, and the knowledge that he had somewhere to be that mattered, someone waiting who valued his presence. It wasn't the life he'd planned. It wasn't what he'd expected when he'd stood outside Romano's 6 months ago, desperate enough to compromise every value he'd thought he possessed. But it was good, solid, built on honesty and mutual respect, and the kind of partnership that grew from working alongside someone day after day. Spring turned toward summer. The building's transformation continued, new windows installed with historic accuracy, the facade cleaned and restored, interior systems updated while maintaining the structure's essential character. Ethan enrolled in online engineering classes, studying at night after Sophie went to bed, slowly rebuilding the future he'd abandoned when Sarah got pregnant. Lena proved to be exactly as complicated as she'd warned, fiercely independent, occasionally prickly, prone to pushing him away when accepting help felt too vulnerable. But she was also generous, brilliant, funny in a dry way that caught him off guard, and completely devoted to the work they were building together. They kept their relationship quiet at first, not hiding exactly, but not announcing it either. Then Sophie mentioned it to Mrs. Patterson, who mentioned it to Jade, who mentioned it to Mr. Reeves, and within a week the entire building knew. The tenants' response was universally positive. Mrs. Patterson declared it was about time. Jade offered to take engagement photos when they got to that point. Mr. Reeves quoted poetry about love finding its proper time. We're the building's entertainment, Lena said one evening while they painted Sophie's room a new color she'd chosen. They've adopted us as their project. Could be worse. They could disapprove. True. Though I suspect they've been rooting for this since the day you moved in. Mrs. Patterson told me last week she knew from the start we'd end up together. Ethan dipped his brush carefully, maintaining the clean line where wall met ceiling. Did she now? And how exactly did she know? She said you looked at me the way her husband used to look at her, like I was the most interesting thing in any room. Lena paused in her painting. Was that true? Even back then? I noticed you. Hard not to. You were smart and sharp and didn't take any of my bullshit excuses about why I couldn't accept help. He smiled at the memory. But I wasn't ready to do anything about noticing, too buried in grief and survival mode. And now? Now I'm ready. Terrified, but ready. They painted in comfortable silence, working in the synchronized rhythm they'd developed over months of shared projects. Sophie was at a sleepover with a school friend. Her first, a milestone that made Ethan simultaneously proud and wistful for how fast she was growing up. Having the evening to themselves felt simultaneously normal and momentous. I've been thinking, Lena said carefully, about the future, about what we're building here. Okay. Marcus contacted me again yesterday, raised his offer significantly. Apparently the development group he represents is getting aggressive about acquiring this block. Ethan's hand stilled mid-brushstroke. Are you considering it? No, but the pressure's increasing. He's not just calling anymore, he's sending lawyers, filing complaints with the city about code violations that don't exist, trying to make holding on to this place so expensive and difficult that selling becomes the only rational option. What can we do? Fight. Document everything. Keep the building in perfect condition so there's no legitimate grounds for complaints. Maybe hire our own lawyer if it escalates. She set down her paint roller. But I wanted you to know what we might be facing. This could get ugly. Marcus doesn't like losing, and he's already held a grudge since you refused his money that night. I don't care about Marcus. I care about you and this building and the life we've built here. Whatever we need to do to protect that, I'm in. Lena turned to face him fully. Even if it gets complicated? Even if standing with me means making an enemy of someone who could make your life difficult? Especially then, I'm done running from difficult things, done choosing the easy path that leads nowhere good. He crossed to where she stood, took her paint-splattered hands in his. Besides, you stood with me when I was at my worst, gave me a job when I had nothing to offer but desperation and honesty. I'm not walking away now when things get hard. She pulled him down into a kiss that tasted like paint fumes and promise. When they separated, her eyes were bright with something beyond simple happiness. I love you, she said quietly. I probably shouldn't say it yet. Too soon, too fast, too risky. But I do. I love you. Ethan's chest felt too full for normal breathing. I love you too. It's terrifying and unexpected and probably too soon, but it's true. I love you. They stood there in Sophie's half-painted room, holding each other while fresh paint dried around them, and their future waited in all its uncertain glory. Outside, Philadelphia hummed with its usual chaos. Inside Brooks' building, in an apartment that had become home, two people who'd both learned how to survive alone were learning how to build something together. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't simple, but it was real and honest and worth fighting for. And for now, that was everything. The fight with Marcus's development group escalated exactly as Lena had predicted. By July, they were facing inspections every other week, each one searching desperately for violations that didn't exist. The city sent fire marshals, building inspectors, health department officials, all responding to anonymous complaints that seemed designed to create a paper trail of harassment rather than address legitimate concerns. Ethan met each inspection with meticulous documentation. Every system they'd upgraded, every repair they'd completed, every permit they'd obtained was organized in binders that he presented to increasingly frustrated inspectors who found nothing wrong. The building was in better condition than it had been in decades, and everyone knew it. They're trying to bury us in bureaucracy, Lena said one evening, reviewing the latest complaint. Make it too expensive and time-consuming to fight. Most small property owners would have given up by now. You're not most property owners. No, I'm stubborn and well-funded and have an engineer boyfriend who documents everything like his life depends on it. She smiled tiredly. We're a formidable team when we're not actively painting Sophie's room. The room had taken 3 weekends to finish because they kept getting distracted by conversation, by stolen kisses, by the comfortable domesticity of building a life together, one small project at a time. Sophie loved the final result, a soft purple that she declared was perfect for reading in bed, and had immediately started planning how to decorate. Their relationship had settled into something that felt simultaneously new and inevitable. Lena spent most evenings at their apartment, joining them for dinner and homework help before retreating to her own place around 9. Sophie had taken to calling her Lena with the same casual affection she used for Mrs. Chen or Mr. Reeves, accepting her presence as a natural part of their daily rhythm. But the pressure from Marcus was taking its toll. Lena was sleeping poorly, stressed about legal bills and the constant threat hanging over the building she'd devoted herself to preserving. Ethan caught her more than once standing in the lobby late at night, just looking at the restored woodwork and polished brass, as if memorizing it against the day it might be taken away. "We're going to win this," he told her one of those nights, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "We're going to keep this building safe." "You can't promise that. Marcus has resources we don't. Political connections. Money to throw at lawyers who specialize in finding loopholes. And we have something better. We have the truth. This building is sound, well-maintained, and filled with people who love living here. That matters." "Does it? In a city where developers always win and preservation is just an inconvenient obstacle to profit?" Ethan turned her around to face him. "It does when we refuse to give up. When we document everything and fight every false claim and make it more expensive for them to harass us than it's worth. When we remind the city that some things matter more than money." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jade, the young artist in 3C who'd moved in the same day Ethan started working, had been quietly documenting the harassment campaign on social media. She'd built a significant following for her digital art, and her posts about Brooks Building's fight against predatory developers had started gaining traction. "People are angry," she told them one Saturday morning, pulling up her phone to show the response. "Not just about this building, but about all the neighborhood buildings getting demolished for luxury development that nobody who actually lives here can afford. Your fight is becoming a symbol." The local news picked up the story within a week. Suddenly, reporters were interviewing tenants, photographing the restored facade, contrasting Brooks Building's careful preservation with the generic glass towers replacing historic structures throughout the city. Lena gave interviews with her characteristic directness, explaining that this wasn't about stopping development, but about valuing what already existed. "Philadelphia has a responsibility to its own history," she told one reporter. "We can grow and change without erasing every building that tells the story of who we've been. Brooks Building has stood for 96 years. It could stand for 96 more if we choose preservation over profit." The publicity changed the calculus. City council members who'd been quietly supporting Marcus's group suddenly had constituents asking why they were enabling the destruction of historic buildings. The inspection slowed, then stopped entirely. Marcus himself showed up at Brooks Building on a Tuesday afternoon, his expression hard with barely contained fury. Ethan was in the lobby when he arrived, had been expecting this confrontation for months. Marcus looked older than he remembered from that terrible night at Romano's, stress aging him in ways that suggested his development deal wasn't going as smoothly as planned. "I want to talk to Lena," Marcus said without preamble. "She's in her office. I'll let her know you're here." "Don't bother. I know where it is." He started toward Lena's door, but Ethan stepped into his path. "You wait here. I'll tell her you want to see her. She can decide if she wants to talk to you." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Still playing the white knight, Ro? That's rich considering you were willing to humiliate her for $600. "I was, and I've spent every day since trying to be better than that moment. What's your excuse for spending months trying to destroy something beautiful just to make money?" "I'm a businessman. I see opportunities and I take them. That building is worth 3 times what we offered if we can just clear the lot and start fresh." That building is someone's home, multiple people's homes, and it's Lena's legacy from her grandmother. It's not just an opportunity, it's people's lives. "Everything's for sale, Ro. Everyone has a price. You proved that yourself." Marcus's smile was cold. "You think she doesn't remember? That every time she looks at you, she doesn't think about the man who agreed to hurt her for money? You built your whole relationship on a lie." "No, I built it on the truth I told after rejecting your money. That's the difference between us. I recognized a mistake and corrected it. You're still trying to justify yours." Before Marcus could respond, Lena's office door opened. She stood in the doorway, small but radiating the kind of presence that made people forget about height and remember only force of will. Marcus, I wondered when you'd show up in person instead of hiding behind lawyers and fake inspections. Lena, you're looking well. Clearly the stress of fighting progress hasn't worn you down yet. Progress. She said the word like it tasted bad. Is that what you call demolishing functioning buildings to construct overpriced boxes? I call it vandalism with better PR. I call it economics, supply and demand. This neighborhood is gentrifying whether you like it or not. You can either profit from it or get swept aside. Or I can hold my ground and force you to work around me, which seems to be happening based on how desperate you're getting. Lena walked closer, had to tilt her head back to look Marcus in the eye, but somehow made it feel like she was looking down at him. The city's losing interest in your complaints. The community's rallying around preservation. And your development group is probably wondering why you can't close a simple property acquisition. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You lost. Not because we outspent you or outmaneuvered you, but because we were right and you were wrong. This building deserves to stand. The people who live here deserve stability, and I deserve to keep my grandmother's legacy intact. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. Go back to your investors and tell them Brooks Building isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. And if you come back here again, it'll be as a tenant paying fair market rent like everyone else. Marcus looked between Lena and Ethan, his expression calculating. Finally, he shook his head. You're making a mistake, both of you. That building is a money pit. The maintenance costs alone will eat you alive over time. And you, he pointed at Ethan, you're tied to a sinking ship. You could have taken my money, walked away, found easier work somewhere else. Instead, you're here playing house with someone who'll resent you the first time a major system fails and the bills pile up. Get out, Ethan said quietly, and don't come back. Marcus left without another word. Through the lobby windows, they watched him get into an expensive car and drive away, probably already planning his next move. But his shoulders were slumped, his movements those of a man who knew he'd lost, but couldn't quite accept it yet. Lena let out a breath she'd been holding for months. Well, that happened. You were magnificent. I was terrified. He's right about one thing. Maintenance costs on a building this old are only going to increase. Eventually, something major will fail, and I'll have to choose between the building and bankruptcy. Then we'll choose the building and figure out the bankruptcy later, together. Ethan pulled her close. You're not alone in this anymore. You've got tenants who love living here. You've got community support. You've got me. We'll make it work. She buried her face against his chest. When did you become the optimistic one? I'm supposed to be the stubborn idealist who refuses to accept defeat. You taught me well. Now I'm just reflecting your lessons back at you. He kissed the top of her head. We're going to be okay. The building's going to be okay. Marcus is done. He was right. Over the next few weeks, it became clear that Marcus's development group had moved on to easier targets. The inspection stopped completely. The lawyer letters ceased. The only communication from Marcus was a terse email informing Lena that his agency would no longer be representing properties in her neighborhood. We won, Jade announced at an impromptu celebration in the tenant lounge. We actually beat a massive development corporation through the power of documentation and social media activism. We won because Lena refused to quit, Mr. Reeves corrected, and because Ethan backed her up with the kind of meticulous record-keeping that made it impossible for them to fabricate violations. We won because we're a community, Mrs. Patterson added. Buildings aren't just structures. They're people choosing to live together, support each other, create something bigger than themselves. Sophie, sitting between Lena and Ethan, looked up at the adults with serious eyes. Does this mean we get to stay? Forever? Forever's a long time, Lena said gently. But yes, we get to stay for as long as we want. The building's safe. The celebration lasted late into the evening, tenants bringing food and drinks, sharing stories about their favorite moments in Brooks Building's history. Ethan watched Lena move through the crowd, accepting congratulations with grace, and thought about how far they'd both come from that disastrous night at Romano's. He'd been a broken man then, desperate enough to compromise his integrity for grocery money. She'd been isolated, her trust in people eroded by years of being treated as less than human because of her dwarfism. Now they were partners, fighting together to preserve something worth saving, building a life based on honesty and mutual respect. Later, after Sophie was asleep and the celebration had wound down, Ethan and Lena stood on the building's roof looking out over the city. The summer night was warm, the sky that particular purple-orange that comes right before full dark. From up here, they could see the whole neighborhood, the mix of historic buildings and modern construction, the parks and the streets, the city constantly changing while trying to remember what it had been. "I have something to tell you," Ethan said. "I've been waiting for the right moment, and I think this might be it." Lena turned to face him, eyebrows raised. "Should I be worried?" "No, at least I hope not. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box. "I know it's fast. I know we've only been officially together for a few months. But I also know that I love you, that Sophie loves you, that I want to build a life with you that's as solid and lasting as this building we've saved together." He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring, nothing extravagant, just a silver band with small stones that caught the fading light. "Lena Brooks, will you marry me?" She stared at the ring, then at him, her expression cycling through shock and joy and something that might have been fear before settling on determination. "Yes, absolutely yes, but I need you to understand what you're signing up for. I'm difficult. I'm independent to a fault. I'll probably drive you crazy with my need to control everything about this building. I have health issues related to my dwarfism that will get worse as I age. I can't have children, the risks are too high. So if you're expecting a traditional family expansion, that's not happening. I have Sophie, that's enough. And I don't want traditional. I want you. Exactly as you are, complications and all." He took the ring from the box. "I spent 3 years drowning in grief, convinced I'd used up my one chance at happiness. You taught me that life doesn't work like that, that broken things can be fixed, that starting over isn't betraying the past. You gave me back my future, Lena. Let me spend it with you." She held out her hand, steady despite the tears streaming down her face. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, because he'd asked Jade to find out her size weeks ago in preparation for this moment. "I love you," Lena said. "I love your daughter. I love the life we're building together. I love that you see me as a person instead of a collection of limitations. I love you too, all of you, the stubborn parts, and the brilliant parts, and the parts that won't admit when you need help." He pulled her close, mindful of their height difference, making sure she felt cherished rather than diminished. "We're going to be happy, Lena. Not perfect, but happy. That's enough." They kissed there on the roof while the city lights came on below them, while Brooks' building settled into its nightly sounds around them, while their future waited to be built one honest day at a time. The wedding took place 6 months later in the building's lobby, surrounded by tenants who'd become family and neighbors who'd supported their fight to preserve something beautiful. Sophie served as flower girl, beaming with pride in a purple dress that matched her bedroom walls. Mrs. Chen cried. Mr. Reeves read poetry. Jade took photographs that captured not just the ceremony, but the joy suffusing every corner of the space. Lena wore a custom-designed dress that honored her grandmother's memory with lace from her grandmother's own wedding gown incorporated into the design. Ethan wore a suit he'd bought for the occasion, the first new clothes he'd purchased in years that weren't from a thrift store. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises about honesty and partnership and building something lasting together. "I promise to see you," Ethan said, holding both her hands. "Really see you. Not your height or your limitations or what the world says you can't do. Just you. The brilliant, stubborn, generous woman who saved me when I couldn't save myself." "I promise to let you help," Lena responded. "To remember that accepting support isn't weakness, that we're stronger together than apart, that love means trusting someone with your broken parts and believing they'll handle them with care." Her voice caught. "You've given me everything I thought I'd lost. Family, partnership, a future that looks like joy instead of just survival. I promise to honor that gift every day for the rest of our lives." The kiss that sealed their marriage was witnessed by everyone who mattered, in a building that had stood for nearly a century and would stand for many more. a testament to the value of preservation and the power of choosing to fight for things worth saving. The reception lasted into the evening, music and laughter filling spaces that had known too much silence before tenants like Jade and Mr. Reeves had brought them back to life. Sophie danced with everyone, her joy infectious, her acceptance of Lena as part of their family, complete and uncomplicated. "She's happy," Mrs. Chen observed, watching Sophie twirl in her dress. "Both of them are. You did good, Ethan. Sarah would be proud." "I hope so. I think about her sometimes, wonder if she'd approve of how I've rebuilt our lives." "She'd approve? She told me once, near the end, that she worried most about you giving up on happiness. Said you had a tendency to sacrifice yourself for others, forget that you deserved good things too." Mrs. Chen patted his arm. "You found someone who won't let you do that, who pushes back and demands you take care of yourself. That's exactly what you needed." Later, when the celebration had wound down and Sophie was asleep in her purple room and the building had settled into quiet, Ethan and Lena stood in their combined apartment. They'd knocked through a wall to connect 2B and 2C, creating space for the family they'd become, and looked at the life they'd built. "We did it," Lena said softly. "Saved the building, got married, created something real." "We did, though if you'd told me a year ago this is where I'd end up, I'd have thought you were crazy. If you told me the man I caught trying to sabotage my date would become my husband, I'd have had you committed." She smiled up at him. "Life's funny like that. The worst moments sometimes lead to the best outcomes if you're brave enough to choose differently." "I chose honesty over money that night. Best decision I ever made." "Second best? The best was asking me to marry you on a roof in summer while the city lights came on around us." She took his hand, traced where his wedding ring now sat. A companion to hers, matching silver bands that spoke of commitment and partnership. "Thank you for seeing past what I was supposed to be to who I actually am, for treating me like a person instead of a problem to solve or inspiration to consume. Thank you for giving me a second chance, for seeing past my worst moment to the person I was trying to become." He kissed her gently. "I love you, Lena Rowe. I love you too, Ethan Rowe. Now and forever, and all the days in between." They stood there in their home, in the building they'd saved together, surrounded by the evidence of lives rebuilt and trust earned and love chosen deliberately every single day. Outside, Philadelphia hummed with its usual chaos, sirens and traffic, and 1,000 other stories unfolding in the darkness. Inside Brooks' building, in an apartment that smelled like wedding cake and possibility, two people who'd both learned how to survive alone were learning how to thrive together. Sophie's door opened quietly. She padded out in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes sleepily. "Can't sleep, baby?" Ethan asked. "I just wanted to make sure you were both still here, that this was real and not a dream." Lena knelt down to Sophie's level, took her hands gently. "It's real. We're a family now, officially and forever. Your dad and I aren't going anywhere. Promise? Promise. Cross my heart." Lena made the gesture solemnly. "You're stuck with me, kiddo. For birthday parties and homework help and all the boring everyday stuff that makes a family a family." Sophie threw her arms around Lena's neck. "I'm glad Daddy met you. Even if it was a weird way to meet someone, Mom would like you. I think she'd be happy we found you." Tears spilled down Lena's cheeks. Ethan joined them, wrapping both his girls in his arms. This family they'd built from broken pieces and honest choices, and the stubborn refusal to accept that second chances weren't possible. "I think she'd be happy too," Ethan said quietly. "I think she'd say we did exactly what we were supposed to do. Keep going, keep trying, keep building something worth fighting for." They stayed like that for a long time, the three of them holding each other in the warm apartment while the building settled around them and their future stretched out in all its messy, beautiful, uncertain promise. Eventually, they got Sophie back to bed, tucked her in with her favorite stuffed rabbit, and the assurance that morning would bring all of them still together, still choosing each other, still building the life they deserved. Years would pass. The building would need repairs they'd tackle together. Sophie would grow up surrounded by people who loved her. More tenants would come and go, each adding their story to Brooks Building's ongoing narrative. There would be hard days and setbacks, and moments when the weight of preservation felt too heavy to carry. But there would also be joy, small, daily, accumulating into a life that mattered. Morning coffee shared over building plans, Sophie's laughter echoing through the lobby. Holidays celebrated with chosen family, the satisfaction of fixing something broken and making it beautiful again. Ethan had walked into Romano's a year ago, convinced he was at his lowest point, willing to compromise everything for $600 and a few more weeks of barely surviving. He'd walked out having made the hardest choice of his life, choosing honesty over expediency, dignity over desperation, the possibility of redemption over the certainty of shame. That choice had led him here, to this moment, to this family, to this life built on the radical notion that broken things could be fixed and second chances existed and love was something you chose actively every single day. It wasn't the life he'd planned. It was better, more complicated, more challenging, more real than any fantasy he could have constructed. It was a life built on truth instead of lies, on partnership instead of isolation, on the daily choice to show up and do the work and believe that effort mattered. It was, in every way that counted, enough, more than enough, everything.